buy or sell on current news is just crazy. You're in a wonderful business. You got people running it for you. You know you're going to do well over 5 or 10 years. And to think news events should cause you to try and dance in and out of something that's a wonderful game is a terrible mistake. So. The idea that you try to time purchases based on what you think business is going to do in the next year or two, I think that's the greatest mistake that investors make, because it's always uncertain. People say, well, it's a time of uncertainty.
Let's talk about IBM for a moment.
Yeah.
And you've said that it was a mistake. We all make mistakes.
It was my mistake.
I make my fair share. But let's go over what you learned from that mistake. I mean, you, as I say, generally you find businesses you believe in over the long term and management you believe in. What went wrong?
Well, I've made lots of mistakes. That's part of the game. I mean, there is no way in the investment business. If somebody says to you they never made a mistake, check them out. But that was a fairly large commitment, and I would say that the competition. What's really fascinating to me, actually, is what Amazon did with the cloud. I mean, here is a company that you don't even think of as being in that business 6 or 7 years ago. And Jeff Bezos has really taken something, you wouldn't have thought they'd be doing that. And from a standing start, and he has even said on Charlie Rose, he was amazed at how much runway he was given. But here are a bunch of very smart people in the tech industry around him, and not just IBM, but Microsoft, Google, you name it. I mean, the people. And they let all of them have a big lead, and you don't want to let a smart fellow have a big lead. Made a lot of mistakes. Biggest mistake, well, not the biggest, necessarily the biggest, but buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake, because Berkshire was a lousy textile business, and I bought it very cheap. I'd been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap, and that I was taught that, say, in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts, and you find this on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. Disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. But in those days, I was buying cheap stocks. And Berkshire was selling below its working capital per share. You got the plants for nothing. You got the machinery for nothing. You got the inventory and receivables at a discount. It was cheap. So I bought it. And 20 years later, I was still running a lousy business, and that money did not compound. You really want to be in a wonderful business, because the time is the friend of the wonderful business. You keep compounding, it keeps doing more business, and you keep making more money. Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking what I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started an insurance business, Seas Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up, rather than using Berkshire as the platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. Investors behave in very human ways, which is they get very excited during bull markets, and they look in the rearview mirror and they say, I made money last year, I'm going to make more money this year, so this time I'll borrow, or the neighbor says, I wasn't in last year when that neighbor was dumber than I made a lot of money, so I'm going to go in this year. So they're always looking in the rearview mirror. And when they look in the rearview mirror and they see a lot of money having been made in the last few years, they plow in and they just push and push and push on prices. And when they look in the rearview mirror and they see no money having been made, they just say, this is a lousy place to be. So they don't care what's going on in the underlying business, and it's astounding. But that makes for a huge opportunity, just huge opportunity.
The idea that the European news or a slowdown in this or that or anything like that, that would not cause you if you owned a good farm and had it run by a good tenant. You wouldn't sell it because somebody said, here's a news item, this is happening in Greece or something of the sort. If you owned an apartment house and you got to raise your rents a little, it was well located, and you had a good manager, you wouldn't dream of selling it. If you had a good business personally, the local McDonald's franchise, you wouldn't be thinking about buying or selling it every day. Now, when you own stocks, you own pieces of businesses, and they're wonderful businesses. You can pick the best businesses in the world. And to buy or sell on current news is just crazy. You're in a wonderful business. You got people running it for you. You know you're going to do well over 5 or 10 years. And to think news events should cause you to try and dance in and out of something that's a wonderful game is a terrible mistake. So,
biggest mistakes people make in investing?
well, they try to, they just don't realize that all you have to do is just buy a cross-section of America and then never listen to people like me or read the papers or do anything subsequently. They think that because you can trade, you should trade. You buy a farm, you buy an apartment house, you can't resell it tomorrow, and the cost of moving around. Now you get something handed to you, liquidity, which is instant. You can sell, and the cost of doing it are pennies, compared to other kinds of investment activity. So because they can so easily move around, they do move around, and moving around is not smarter than investing. The idea that you try to time purchases based on what you think business is going to do in the next year or two, I think that's the greatest mistake that investors make, because it's always uncertain. People say, well, it's a time of uncertainty. It was uncertain on September 10th, 2001. People just didn't know it was uncertain. It's uncertain every single day. So take uncertainty as part of being involved in investment at all. But uncertainty can be your friend. I mean, when people are scared, they pay less for things. And we try to price. We don't try to time at all. If I buy a farm near here and it turns out to be a terrible year, and pests come in and there's no rain and all that sort of thing, am I going to sell it for half the price that it was selling for a year earlier, when I know over the next 100 years there's going to be 90 years that are pretty good, and a few bad ones? It doesn't make any sense to try and time things that way. And nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, ever. The only thing is they get very apprehensive about it at certain times, particularly when other people are apprehensive. When people get scared, they get scared as a group. The confidence comes back sort of one at a time. But there has been a lot of things that have been cleaned up in the economy in the last 18 months. A lot of the toxic assets are in better shape. There are going to be 4.5 million homes or thereabouts sold this year. There are 80 million homes roughly in the country. 25 million of them don't even have a mortgage. Of the 4.5 million homes that are sold, the people that are buying those are putting down reasonable down payments in many cases. They're buying them much more cheaply. They're covering it better with their income. So the liar's loans have disappeared to a great extent. So every day, those homes are going into better hands. 4.5 million homes will be in better hands, stronger hands, people that can handle the payments better at the end of the year than it was at the start of the year. So right. The system is cleansing itself, but it doesn't do it in a day or a week or a month or even a year.
You can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. Investors behave in very human ways, which is they get very excited during bull markets, and they look in the rearview mirror and they say, I made money last year, I'm going to make more money this year.
To buy or sell on current news is just crazy. You're in a wonderful business. Time purchases based on what you think business is going to do in the next year or two, I think that's the greatest mistake